Do what you gotta do, my wild, sweet love. One of my favorite Nina Simone songs. And really a great little title to remember. Do what you gotta do. But do it conscious, heart-centered, divinely guided. I am Reverend Amani Malaika, and I want to talk about conscious action, divine right action, what it means in our mission statement at the Albuquerque Center for Spiritual Living to be love in action.
So we're talking about leaning in towards the light, and there's just so much to say about this. Lean in towards the light is not a complicated idea, right? When you think about okay, I can do that, I can lean towards the light. I can remember in the darkest of times, in the stormiest of times, in the long nights of winter, that the light remains. Why does that seem hard? Because it's really not complicated. And yet the only thing I want to talk about really today is how. How do we do that? How do we commit ourselves to coming back to the light? How do we commit ourselves to posturing ourselves towards the light? That our actual stance in the world, our actual stance in our relationships, the actual stance in our own consciousness is towards the light. I want to share a little Nikki Giovanni snippet. We lost beloved Nikki Giovanni, who is an incredible poet who had a huge influence on my life, and if you don't know about her, go read her stuff. She says, "I offer no apology, only this plea. When I am frayed and strained and drizzle at the end, please someone, cut a square and put me in a quilt, that I might keep some child warm, and some old person with no one else to talk to will hear my whispers." Isn't that lovely? Cut me a square and add me to the quilt of some child or elder person's life. This is a way to lean in towards the light, right? Even in our death, we can have a stance, we can have a posture, we can have an intention to lean towards the light, to be of use, to be a participant in the upliftment of somebody. But I think it requires you and I to determine ourselves someone who is postured towards the light. We all lean, right? Stand up for a minute, if you will. Humor me. Just humor me. If you're able, stand. And just find your stance. Just like, how do you normally stand? You're in the grocery store. Imagine yourself in the grocery store. Close your eyes. Take a few steps. Put yourself in line. How do you lean? Just notice. We all lean. We all have a certain way we stand and a certain way we posture. And I'm asking you, okay, take your seat. I'm asking you to get really intentional about that lean. Get really intentional about the way you stand and how you stand and what maybe you are a stand for. Are you someone who leans back and sort of keeps yourself out of the fray? Are you one of these people? I'm not going to get involved, right? Might even be over here judging every single one of you. That's a certain stance. That's a posture. Or are you curious about the possibility? Could you lean in to see what light is available in what appears to be a really dark, dark situation? It's a very different way of being, yeah? I think one of the things we have to talk about when we talk about this simple thing, I'm going to lean towards the light. I'm a spiritual person, right? Everybody in the room, you consider yourself a spiritual person, that you're walking a spiritual path of some kind? You're doing some good in the world? So you would imagine that you could assume yourself to be someone who leans towards the light. But are you? Do you know how important you are in that standing? Do you recognize that your leaning towards the light has everything to do with the light of the world? Your lean. I think the biggest thing in the way of more light being brought to the world, and I'm not talking about getting rid of darkness, right? We talked about that last week. You can go watch it on YouTube, Honor the Dark. What I'm talking about is, do you understand your inherent belonging and natural place in the order of things? Does everybody know about twinkle lights? Everybody use twinkle lights in some form or fashion in your home, holiday decorations, just have them. My niece and nephew just have them, twinkle lights up everywhere. But the way the twinkle lights typically work, right, is you have the strand of the twinkle lights. And how many of you, every year, you unpack your lights and then some strands don't work? Right? And so you go bulb by bulb. Because there's somewhere in the line is a bulb that lost its connection, right? Those little 2 wires that come out from the bulb that have to touch the thing to make the whole strand work. And you go bulb by bulb by bulb, and you're like, which stinky bulb is not connected? Or you throw them away, right? I'm suggesting that you are a bulb in the strand of the ultimate strand of twinkly lights. And if you, my friend, are unconnected, you F up the whole strand. You become the reason there is less light. You have a very important job to play. You already are a part of this one thing, this one light, this one love, this one life that is the life of the one. And when you are disconnected, nobody gets twinkly lights. That is why this idea of leaning toward the light is actually radically important. Simple, yeah. But how do you stay connected? How do you make it your stance to be the one who is standing solidly connected into the ground of the Holy Blessed One? Thing that I think is in the way is we don't think we are important in the grand scheme of things. We don't think it matters whether or not we're connected. We don't recognize that we are already in line, have a place in the natural order of all that is, a very important place. And because we think so little of ourselves, we step out of line. And I mean, we step out of line. I'm talking about misbehavior. This simple idea that I am not enough, that I don't matter, that I don't belong. Who has belonging stuff? I never feel like I belong anywhere. I'm always an outsider. Right? That idea keeps the lights turned off. That idea has you out of line. And I want you to think about when you don't recognize that your behavior, your way of being, your stance and posture in the world is always impacting the whole. There is no other possibility because it is one life. Oneness is not just this cute, airy-fairy concept. It is a truth that you belong to, that you have a place in this natural order. Every single one of us is in line. So when you choose to step out of line, when you choose to see yourself as less than, when you drink the Kool-Aid of cultural systems of oppression that tell you you're less than, and you believe that, internalize it, you are out of line. I want you to think about all the people you think are out of line right now in the world. Right? You got a list, huh? You just clicking them off. So many people out of line. But are you out of line? Are you disconnected from your place in the natural order of this one life, this one love? The oneness that we wish was more manifest in the world. Are you connected? Or are you one of the bulbs that's blown out? Because that's where bad behavior actually comes from. We like to think that bad behavior is other people behaving badly because something's wrong with them. Right? But what if the only thing that is actually going on is they are disconnected, they are not plugged in? And you and I all know what it's like to not be plugged in. And what if you decide that your stance is one of leaning in? One of leaning in and finding your feet beneath you in your place that has been divinely appointed as yours. That you are the one place, you have this one thing to do, which is to be who you've been designed to be in the life that you've been living, in the environment that you find yourself wildly plugged in and ready to shine. And it makes all the difference in the world that you do. That's how important you are. So to make it your job to lean in towards the light, to always find the light. Because in the moments of darkness, which there will guaranteed be moments of darkness every day, because it's called nighttime. It's called winter. It is built into the design of things. There will be storms. There will be darkness. There will be bad behavior. There will be the days you are unplugged. But when you make it your work and your job and your priority and your commitment to the collective to plug back in when you've forgotten, to find your way back when you've stepped out of line. When you make that the number one priority of remembering the truth of who you are, you lean in towards the light again and again and again and again. And we do this because there is a natural order. And this natural order is divinity itself expressing itself through every tiny bit and being and photon and molecule of life itself. And you are a part of that, which means you have a role to play, you have a job to do, to bring your light in the place that you're meant to bring it, the place that you are. But it also requires you and I to have a slightly different posture in the world than maybe we're used to having, especially as Americans. I'm going to refer to Martin Luther King Jr.'s concept of other-centeredness. And Peace Prize speech when he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He had this to say as part of it. I believe that what self-centered people have torn down, people other-centered can build up. I still believe that one day humankind will bow before the altars of God and be crowned triumphant over war and bloodshed, and nonviolent redemptive good will proclaim the rule of the land. This is why you commit yourself to being plugged in and staying in line, staying connected, leaning in with curiosity. May we be the ones who keep the lights on. May we be the ones who are the place where redemptive good can show up. And I want to talk now very specifically, because it's a cute concept, other-centeredness. I'm other-centered. Are you? How do you know you're other-centered? How do you know that your stance, I'm not talking about like I did a nice thing last week. I'm talking about your stance in your life. You have an outward stance. You are leaning in towards possibility and curiosity about the life around you, the people around you, the world around you. You are other-centered, which means that bootstrap and hyper-individualism can't work. How many of you have raised children? How often do you wish you could just tell them to be hyper-individualistic and pull themselves up by their bootstraps and just work it out? Especially if you are parenting young adults. Holy crap. However, we know as parents, as someone who has dedicated huge chunks of our lives to someone else's well-being, that the only way that that works out at any kind of well is when we are centered around their well-being. You know as a parent, there are parts of the deal where you must put yourself second or third or seventh. That's the deal in parenting. It's also the deal in life. So I know that there's this whole idea, like, especially moms, like, put your own mask on first. Yes. Stay plugged in. Stay plugged in so you can put others in your periphery, in your view, in the center of what is important and what matters when it is necessary. So I'm not saying disregard yourself, think little of yourself. I'm saying quite the opposite. I'm saying stay so connected and so plugged in that when you are other-centered and working on being an active and impactful and helpful and uplifting part of the collective in your own household, in your relationships as a parent, you can. Being other-centered requires you to be plugged in and well-fed and sourced. But I think we got lost in this whole hyper-individualist bootstrap mentality situation where we forgot our place in the natural order of things. That there is one life, that we are all plugged in the same line of energy. Because there's one place to be plugged in. There's one source of true power, of goodness, that is the love itself that has brought itself to life as you and I. So this one source, the place that you and I can plug in and be a shining example, be a shining light for someone who may be lost along the way, means that you must be plugged in first in order to be other-centered. But they go hand in hand. Your work is not done after you've plugged in. Your work has just begun. So to be other-centered, to be the place where love shows up, which is what conscious action is really about, you start with being plugged in. You start with posturing yourself and determining yourself as someone who stays plugged in and eyes and mind and heart and arms wide open to what is happening in the world around you so that you can respond accordingly. This is spiritual living. We way overteach the plugged in part. And then we stop. We're like, hey, you plugged in? Great, bye. That's step one. That's actually the pre-step. It's not even step one. That's the starting line. How do you begin to make being plugged in your normal? What are the practices that help you stay plugged in, that help you not be that one bulb in the strand? One of mine is gardening, right? I went out and repaired frozen, broken hoses this morning. And I thought to myself, this is some wildly satisfying stuff. Thank you, God, for some broken hoses on a winter's day. So take a moment right now and think about what are the things that you already know help you lean in, help you find the ground of God beneath you. Just take a moment and think about that. Find at least 3. For those of you at home watching online, jot them down. All right, and then for those of you in the room, turn to your neighbor. Share with them what are a few things you do to stay plugged in. If you are introverted and you don't want to talk to anybody, totally fine. We have journals. Anybody, raise your hand if you would like a journal, and you could write down your reflections. All right. You might have to get up and move or turn your chair. If you haven't traded shares yet, trade shares. All right, let's wrap up our conversation. Thank our partners for sharing. If you didn't exchange names, exchange names. So, one of the reasons I love that song, Harmonize by Rising Appalachia, is the chorus is, I'm awake for you. Right? I lean in towards the light for you. I stay connected for you. So one of my questions, really guiding questions for our practice, which you're getting homework, is who are you awake for? Who are you staying committed for, to staying plugged in? And I want to throw one possibility out there. You may have kids or pets or humanity or the planet or, climate, justice is why you're plugged. Like, you may have a bunch of who and what and why. But when I was answering this question for myself, I thought, I'm awake for God. Right? I'm awake to and for this one incredible divine appointment that I've been given. Somehow, in the grand scheme of the divine incarnating itself as life itself, I got to be one of the bulbs. You got to be one of the bulbs. I'm awake for that. What or who are you awake for? This is what we must commit ourselves to and stay conscious of, stay awake for. And then when I begin to really think about the particulars of the divine that is my why, when I choose to stay awake for God, when I choose to be a vessel, when I choose to be used in divine right action, consciously and awake, eyes wide open, heart wide open, mind wide open, arms wide open, I actually get to be in relationship with God itself because of you, because I get to run into you, because of the silly little plants. I saw a cabbage worm on my broccoli plants today. It is December. But had I not been awake and conscious, eyes wide open, checking out the way God was showing up in my garden today, I would have missed this little cabbage worm who had to say goodbye to its life. But I would have missed it. And I literally was like, what are you doing here? It's December, dude. Why are you chewing on my broccoli? Because I'm awake for God, I get to have all of these moments and interactions and intimate relationship with God through life itself. So I want you to take a moment, because your homework is to get really specific about the way you are going to be the light. You are going to be the twinkle light for somebody in your life, in your environment, in your very specific place, in the natural order of things. Your practice is, I'm going to choose daily, at least once this week, pick something that you will actually do, to be the upliftment, to be the presence of goodness in an environment that I am in my life. Could be for your kiddos. Could be for a neighbor. Could be for a cashier. You determine very specifically how you are going to be awake for God this week. Yeah? You in? Raise your hand. You accept the assignment? Those of you online, put a comment in the feed. May we each continue to lean in towards the light. May we understand our wildly important place in the order of things.